Hey.
So Tyler gave a really great intro with your pedigree, Coursera, Google Brain, and you have this new thing. But we're supposed to get real about AI right now. So I want to kind of set the stage here, and you tell me, out of this broad spectrum of definitions we have for AI, on one end you have full sentience, on the other end you have maybe kind of more simple algorithms. In your view, how do you define AI?
AI has always been a moving target. It's very transformative. It's also hard. Even AI insiders like me, we have a hard time defining AI some days. Once upon a time, I remember when finding the shortest path to drive from, say, here from Manhattan to Queens, the shortest path algorithm, that used to be cutting-edge AI, invented by a Stanford professor. Now it's just a GPS, so that's old news. And I think today, 99% of the economic value created by AI is through one type of technology called supervised learning, which learns input to output mappings. But I think finding the right use cases just for this one technology will create a lot of commercial value and will probably transform every major industry.
And that just so happens to be what your new venture here. You've been working on LandingAI for about a year, I think. Can you just give us a high-level view and explain what LandingAI does and how you work with companies that might not typically be considered tech companies and kind of come in and techify them?
So LandingAI works with companies to help jumpstart AI adoption. I think as you saw from my background, I had built up the Google Brain team, which helped Google learn about, become good at modern AI. Also led AI at Baidu in China and arguably helped make Baidu China's greatest AI company. But I think the next wave of AI adoption will be outside the software internet industry. McKinsey recently published a report estimating $13 trillion of global economic growth due to AI. And most of this growth is not in software internet, it's in sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, retail, transportation, logistics. So today, LandingAI partners with companies mostly outside the software internet sector to help inject that AI DNA to create this type of enterprise value.
So give me an example of that. If I'm running a shipping company or a trucking company or a grocery store, how do I get it to the next level by putting AI into it?
One of the challenging things about AI is that it's reshaping the nature of many industries. Maybe to make an analogy from the last wave of technological disruption, a taxi company plus a website is not an internet company. Instead, what the internet did was not just help companies throw out websites, it transformed the nature of transportation. I think Uber and Lyft and Grab and Didi and Ola, those are true internet companies. And with the rise of AI, it gives us an opportunity to rethink how different industry verticals will be changed from where do you play, what are the defensible assets, what are the key activities that create value. And many companies are still on the journey to figure out how the rise of AI technology, maybe much like the rise of the internet and much like the rise of cloud, is already disrupting different industries. Published online earlier, several months ago, an AI transformation playbook that talks about a sequence of steps, similar to what my teams did at Google and Baidu to help companies become AI enabled. And this ranges from scoping out and executing pilot projects. One of the hard things about AI is identifying the right use cases. So scoping out and executing pilot projects, to building an in-house team to provide training, shaping strategy, to managing comms, everything from stakeholder, investor relations, and other forms of comms. And I think after a 2-year engagement, we hope to help a company become a leading AI-enabled company in your business vertical. And I think that would create a lot of value, help some companies become much more effective and valuable. Maybe one way to think about it is, I think if a company hires me or hires us as your outsourced chief AI officer, our business model is that we will cook for you, but also teach you how to cook so that after a couple of years, you could re-insource the AI function and hopefully be a leading AI-enabled business in your industry vertical.
So when you're looking at certain industries, you mentioned Uber and Lyft as an example that has successfully done this with transportation. Obviously, Amazon, we've seen it done with commerce. What other industries, what low-hanging fruit do you see out there that can be transformed next?
I think so far the software internet industry has transformed using AI. So I've seen with my own eyes, right, the direct bottom line impact in companies like Google and Baidu, and I've seen from afar the impact on internet companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon. The next wave will be things like manufacturing, retail, agriculture, healthcare, all of those other industries. I think the non-software internet industries are behind the software internet industry, but I actually find it difficult to name an industry that will not be transformed using AI. And one of the most exciting and transformative trends we've seen is the rise of the internet and now the rise of AI is causing more industries to become winner take most or winner take all. And maybe one example. A couple decades ago, you could be a pretty happy small-scale chicken farmer. Raise the chickens, sell them, sell the eggs. But with the rise of technology, centralized players, for example, Tyson Chicken, I have no affiliation with them, centralized players can now use much more data, like imagery, land data, as well as chicken farming technology in order to acquire tremendous market power. So two of the most powerful trends over the last decade has been the rise of the internet allows centralized players to bring in data from all around the country, all around the world. So you can put IoT into every little chicken farm, every little farm. Centralize the data. AI is making it much more efficient to process that data in a centralized way. And that data asset, those network effects are causing multiple industries, not just software internet, to become winner take most or winner take all industries. And because tech has affected every industry, I feel like in many industry verticals, there is a race is on among both incumbent large companies as well as the disruptors to see who can figure out the appropriate business model and be the one to enjoy the economies of scale, positive feedback loop, so winner take most types of dynamics, which are becoming increasingly common.
So when I hear you talk about this, chicken farms being reinvented, shipping and manufacturing being reinvented, I immediately think the current jobs in those industries and how they will be impacted and affected. There's all this concern around AI replacing people in things like call centers and this skills gap people are going to have coming as this just rapidly advances. Just can you talk a little bit about how the people in this room should be thinking about that as they adopt these technologies into their businesses?
I hope we'll treat people well. From the societal point of view, it turns out I've worked on a lot of AI projects, some that save costs, like call center automation, some that generate more revenue. And it turns out that a lot of the biggest opportunities, I'm generalizing in very broad swaths right now, many of the biggest opportunities are actually in generating more revenue rather than saving costs, because you only save so much cost. Maybe, for example, LandingAI, one of the verticals we've done a lot of work in is manufacturing, where we do a lot of work in visual inspection. So rather than having humans check, if a manufacturer's smartphone has a scratch, we use computers to do that. And it turns out that many of our customers are motivated more by quality and efficiency and yield rather than just by the labor cost savings of automating away someone's job. And I find if I take very broad averages across many industries that the opportunities to generate more value have on average been more exciting than the ones to merely save costs. Having said that, AI is automation on steroids. There are a certain set of things we know how to automate. With the rise of AI, what we can automate is now much bigger. And so this will have a big impact on jobs. I think as a society, we have a responsibility to make sure people have opportunity at a meaningful work and a meaningful way to earn a livelihood for themselves, which is why I think government actually has a huge role to play in this, to keep on investing in education so that people can reskill themselves for the jobs of the future, or for the jobs, everything from wind turbine technician to healthcare worker to teacher, there's so many jobs where we just don't have enough people to do the work right now that I think significant investments, especially by the public, are needed to make sure, even as we create tremendous wealth, which we will, I think it's really clear, right? That even as tremendous wealth, that this time round, that wealth is fairly shared.
So you mentioned the government. So are you saying the government has more of the burden to make sure people are retrained as this happens, more so than the private industry?
I think as a society, we need to figure this out, and private parties have a huge role to play. You know, I think that the public government also has a huge role to play. It really depends, partly depends on your beliefs about whether education is a private good or a public good. I think it is, it has elements of both, where education creates huge positive externalities and does. You know, one could easily argue that it's economically efficient for the public to pay for a lot of the education and reskilling. But I think as corporations, we should also step up and provide leadership where we can to make sure that the people whose livelihoods we affect are treated well and treated fairly. I think that's important too.
I want to throw it to one of our guest moderators, Sanjay Srivastava from Genpact. He had a good question about this that he submitted about the social impacts of AI. And Sanjay, if you want to kind of expand on that for Andrew.
Look, this question about the human in the loop is an important one. By the way, we're a professional services firm. We work with Fortune 500 companies. There isn't a board that we walk into that isn't already discussing AI. But equally, there isn't a board that we don't meet that is actually talking about the role of the employees and the cross-skilling that's required to be able to get them there. One of the things I think we find really interesting is, and I've read through some of your work, a lot of machine learning is around goal orientation. It's around contextualization. So you need a deep understanding of the domain to be able to effectively use it. And so, you know, in our mind, there's a role for a human in the loop that is all around making AI more usable and as an augmentation technology, as opposed to, and I think you were talking earlier about a replacement technology. And this tug of war between it being an augmentation technology where humans have a role to play, and thus for employers, there's a role around cross-skilling, not into a completely new career, but actually taking the best of what you do and applying it to make AI more effective and more augmentative, versus necessarily sort of giving up on that and then moving into something else. How do you help us think through a little bit about, you know, boards of large corporations, how to think about cross-skilling and what's the real objective that we should be shooting for?
I think whether we end up augmenting humans or going to full automation, it depends a lot on the details of the business use case. And a very common pattern is augmentation, you know, that creates data that leads to increasing levels of full automation. I saw this in the rise of the ad industry, where initially the ad salespeople were very skeptical about machine learning programmatic advertising. So the ad salespeople would say, look, Andrew, I know this advertiser, I know this website, I'm going to place this travel ad on this website because I know these guys. Trust me, I'll place the ad. So my community, the AI community, said, okay, fine, you know, we trust you. And then the AI algorithm started to augment them, where we wouldn't do anything automatically, but we would make suggestions. So we would come with conclusions like, hey, did you know the travel industry, if you send more salespeople there, you could sell a lot more ads. So we started to make suggestions, more augmentation. And then as the technology matured, we started to say, you know what, we can make very good decisions with programmatic advertising, but we really value your input. Give me your best insights. I want to make sure my learning algorithm fully takes into account your best insights so we can make the best decisions. And then as the technology matured even further, we all know how that history played out. It turns out ad salespeople still have a very important role, but today, you know, programmatic advertising with the rise of data and technology is so powerful. So I think in many industries, there will be this trend. I think this will happen in healthcare. LandingAI, some of my teams looking at healthcare as well, where initially we should help doctors with diagnosing, but we will shift, the industry will shift over some period of time from pure assistance augmentation to increasing levels of automation. And I think the job consequences are therefore something we need to manage as well.
So we just came off a panel about regulation, and not discussed so much in that panel was where AI's role plays in this. We've already seen a little movement here in the United States. San Francisco, for example, banned facial recognition publicly. We're seeing some blowback from companies like Amazon for working with police departments on facial recognition. When it comes to AI and how rapidly it's advancing and permeating these other industries, in your view, what does the right kind of regulation around AI look like?
Governments with thoughtful regulation will see faster adoption of AI. A lot of regulations were written for the pre-AI era, but there are outcomes we do want to enable. We do want AI-powered healthcare. We do want more efficient AI-powered manufacturing. We do want AI-powered finance, But there are also outcomes we don't want. We don't want patients harm. There's certain outcomes we don't want for the financial system. Self-driving cars, we want some things to happen, but we want it to be safe. So I think governments that rethink regulations will be able to enable these new technologies to come to market faster in their jurisdictions or in those countries, while also driving more economic growth and also doing what governments do have a responsibility for, which is keeping their citizens, keeping the people safe. So I think governments should take a thoughtful approach. I don't think a laissez-faire, hands-off approach is the right approach either, because we do want these regulations rethought to enable the new outcomes of AI. It's interesting. One of the things did earlier this year was release a course titled AI for Everyone by LandingAI, hosted by Coursera. There's actually one country that I won't name where, as far as I know, they're getting their entire cabinet to take AI for everyone. And that excites me, because when the entire cabinet of government learns a bit about AI, this allows them to have that deeper understanding beyond the hype to drive regulatory change through the country.
I'm going to throw it to another one of our guests. I think we have Mike Polcari from 23andMe here. You had a question for us?
I think you have a sample of my DNA in your file.
Mine too, actually.
Yeah, glad to hear it. I had a few questions, actually. I guess the first one, while we're talking about using AI in clinical settings, what do you look for quality measures before getting into an autonomous car or before using AI in a clinical setting?
Yeah, I think it is, let's see, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what it takes to take AI projects to production. I think, but my father's a doctor. I grew up in a healthcare-oriented family. I think patient safety is absolutely paramount. But the harder question is, how do we ensure that patient safety? I think for now, some of my teams are working toward deploying things that assist humans, because we can keep that safe. At Stanford Hospital, we have a system that runs every night, looking at EHRs to recommend for consideration patients for palliative care, for end-of-life care. So the system runs every single night at Stanford University Hospital, but there's a clinician that looks at the output of our algorithm and makes a decision on which files to pull out, which doctors, which primary care physicians to call up. So physician is making the final decision. Over the longer term, I think it is hard. One of the challenges with AI is that the technology doesn't always match up to the business use cases. And so how can we build an AI system and trust it to run and not suddenly screw up in some surprising way 2 years down the line? And so I think we are still working out the right safety protocols for that. For what it's worth, I think the current FDA has actually been quite thoughtful in engaging with the technical community and thinking through the issues, despite varied views in the current administration. But I think that thoughtful approach, and it is hard. I think I don't know all the answers to that. But we are seeing exciting technology solutions to make our AI systems more robust, so that even after you deploy it, you're some reassurance that it will be safe. Or if it doesn't know what it's doing, then it alerts a human operator, so a human doctor can come and take a look before something bad happens.
And I want to play off what you said about this thoughtful regulation. Part of the argument we hear from big tech companies is, if we don't do it, China is going to do it instead. They're going to beat us. We're in competition with China. Meanwhile, in China, a lot of the abuses we see around AI are happening in that country. How should companies here be thinking about competition with China as they integrate AI into their businesses?
Much like the rise of electricity transformed every industry, AI is also going to transform every industry. And I think the phrasing of this as a competition is not the most useful framing. I'm very happy that many countries all around the world have strong electric grids. Latin America, Southeast Asia, Europe, lots of countries have great electric grids in this policy economy, and I think it's great that we can all learn from each other how to operate electric grids better. So I don't think that AI is a zero-sum game. I don't think it's a race, and I think I do think the U.S. is probably the U.S. public investments in AI are below where I think they should be. But I don't think that we need to use the fear of bogeymen.
You said public investment. Can you tie a dollar figure to that? What you think we should be investing?
Gosh, let's see. U.S. GDP is $19 trillion. Is it? Let's invest all of it. No, I don't know. I think we were used to in the Obama era. We invested hundreds of billions of dollars, right, in the bailout, which turned out to be a good move. I could see us making very large investments, not just in physical infrastructure, but in human capital, in education and training, but then also in basic technology. If not for DARPA and the NSF funding my work at Stanford University, I would not have gone to Larry Page to propose starting the Google Brain project. So the early story of US government funding is not widely appreciated, and I was there, right? 10, 15, 20 years ago, I saw the impact that US public funding had on institutions like Stanford and many others, and how that drove AI forward. And I think it's important for the US to maintain its leadership by making sure that funding for basic research is sustained at a high level.
Okay. I want to wrap it up. I think we have one more question from Dr. Om Nalmasu from Applied Materials.
Some of you might not know Applied Materials. We provide technology solutions for semiconductor fabrication. Every chip that is ever made in the world uses 50% of Applied Materials technology. So putting the commercial aside,
when I visit manufacturing plants, I see lots of your machines in lots of cities all around the world. So,
yeah. So you mentioned that AI is like new electricity, and you talked about the transformative effect it can have on multiple industries, generating tremendous value. One aspect I'm concerned about is the overall power consumption of the AI data centers, whether it is on the training or inference. If you look at from now to 2025, the power needs of the AI data centers would grow 500% and would require 10% of world's electricity generated just for the AI data centers. And 2025 is really the first inning. So if you're really looking at the pervasive adoption of AI to realize this tremendous value potential, do you think there is enough done with respect to entire computing architecture as well as the AI architecture to be power efficient? Otherwise, this is going to be a major challenge.
Yeah.
If we can just get a quick final thought on this.
Sure. I think this is one of many challenges. But one of the exciting things is that, I don't see Moore's law for AI chips. It still has quite a lot of room to run. And so I think continued advances in faster computers will continue to power more AI innovations. I think everything from faster networking, faster compute, faster memory interconnects, as well as lower power are problems that the technical community are working on. And I do see encouraging signs of progress that I think just as Moore's law powered the whole Silicon Valley industry for many decades, there are innovations like this that seem to me still to have a significant room to run, and that I think innovations like this in the fundamental compute infrastructure will continue to power the rise of AI for many years to come. I don't think that will run out of steam anytime soon.
Sounds good. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.